On episode 700 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we're going to talk about an epidemic that's going across the world that most people aren't talking about, but most of us are experiencing at some level or another. That is the epidemic of loneliness. Welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, the largest and longest running health and fitness podcast dedicated to people over 40. Whether you're looking to lose weight, get stronger, or improve your health and age better, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Coach Allan, an online health and fitness coach and author of the Wellness Roadmap. Each week, we dive into practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and fitness. If you're ready to look, feel, and perform your best, no matter your age, this podcast is the perfect place to start. Let's get you on the path to a healthier, fitter, and more energetic version of yourself. I hope you'll join us each week, and together we can unlock your full potential. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. This is actually episode 700. I'm glad you're here. I really am, and you'll hear more about why in a little bit. But I'm glad you're here. Hope you get a lot out of this show. Again, I'm just excited to be able to share all this with you. As you hear this, as I release this episode, is Tuesday, the 24th, I should be helping my sister move. So that's what I should be doing about the time probably you're listening to this or you're downloading this. So wish me luck. Wish me luck that that's exactly what I'm doing, because that's what I need to be doing today. Anyway, yes, I'm back in the United States trying to settle up my mother's affairs, get her house sold, get her truck sold, and then be hopefully over with all this executor stuff. It's been a lot more of a pain than I thought it would be, but it's getting done. I'm there. I'm getting it done. A couple more weeks in the United States, then I'm at a family reunion. And then I go down to Mississippi for the birth of my first grandson. So pretty exciting times for me. Again, really excited to get into this episode with you. It's a topic I've thought about a lot over the course of the last couple years. We went through a thing with COVID, and you'll remember that. That was a period for a lot of us of extreme loneliness. And so all of us at some point or another are probably experiencing some level of loneliness. And I wanted to dive into it because it is an important health and fitness topic that almost nobody's talking about. And that's a shame. We need to talk about this just a little bit more. Okay, so the government, through the Surgeon General, and this was Dr. Vivek Murthy, he was the Surgeon General when this report came out in 2023. And the title of the report was Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. And really, no one talked about this, but the core message from this report was that social connection is a fundamental human need. It's just as essential as food and water, and the U.S. is facing a public health crisis due to rising rates of loneliness and social isolation. Now, I want to be honest with you. I think, yes, a lot of this did have to do with COVID, but I think a lot of it also had to do with how the media and how the government were talking about COVID and our response to COVID. And I'd said something about this back then when they were saying we needed to, they call it social distancing. And I said, okay, I understand why they're using that term because it's a scientific term, but that's not what we as people need. We need social closeness. What we needed was physical distancing. And unfortunately, they used the wrong words. But even with that, realizing that nearly 50% of U.S. adults reported experiencing loneliness, and that was even before COVID-19. So I think at this point, it's getting worse. And unfortunately, it's the younger adults and the older adults, that are particularly vulnerable to loneliness. Okay. There are a lot of health risks associated with loneliness that include increased risk of premature death and almost as much as if you were smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's, again, how they like to measure your increased risk of death is on how many cigarettes it is. So they're saying loneliness is the equivalent of a 15 cigarette a day habit. It's associated with higher risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, dementia, depression, and anxiety. And it also increases inflammation, stress hormone activity, and negatively affects behavior and immune function. So, just the physical effects of loneliness are enough to make you sick. They're enough to make you die early. So, this is something that's pretty important. And then, of course, it's also going to affect our communities. And one of the effects is, of course, that Medicare, Medicaid, loneliness, this was an estimate in this report by the Surgeon General, loneliness costs Medicare $6.7 billion a year, and mostly from increased hospital and nursing home use. So just realizing that solving this problem can be a pretty important thing. They go through to say, okay, what's causing this? It's demographic trends, digital technology replacing face-to-face, declines in community involvement. So this is like faith groups, churches, clubs, and physical separation due to the pandemic. I also think a lot of people had feelings during that period of time, and they went a little tribal on it and opted to rid themselves of some of their closest relationships. And if that's happened, just realize that's going to be a hard problem to solve. If you're caught up in all of this stuff that's going on and you can't see past that to see that your health and fitness is impacted by those feelings, then you're in for a bit of a treat. I'll call it early death and sickness. Okay. Now, when we get older, loneliness has some pretty significant impacts on us. It causes cognitive decline. So isolation increases the risk of dementia by up to 50%. Physical decline in that isolated adults are more prone to falls, slower recovery, and hospital readmission. It affects our mental health. Loneliness exacerbates depression, anxiety, and feelings of meaninglessness and chronic disease management. Individuals with poor social support have worse outcomes managing diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. So I think you can see as we get older, this problem becomes more and more important. We need those social connections to keep us engaged, to help us be physically involved and have the support we need when we need it most, okay, which is typically when we're older. And then I would equate this, in his book, in Dan Buettner's book, The Blue Zones. That's been kind of the seminal work that most people in the aging community will turn to say, okay, the folks that are living the longest, what are some of the attributes they have? And, of course, they'll talk about diet and they'll talk about their movement, which are both significantly different than folks that live in the industrialized world for the most part. They move more and they eat cleaner, period. But they also have strong social integration. That's also a part of it. Again, a lot of people skip over that. They go straight to the food or straight to the movement, but it's just as important to have the relationships, the social support. He used a term that one of them uses called MOAs, which is social support groups, intergenerational households. We don't see that as much anymore. Family moves away from family, sometimes great distances, and we don't see each other as much. And then we just don't have a lot of the same social things that we used to do. It used to be you would go to church groups, you would go to social clubs. Everybody had their club. Everybody had their social group. I remember back in the day, there was all the women played the bunco. Everybody's playing bunco. And that was a regular weekly thing. That's not happening as much. There used to be book clubs. Women would get together and talk about books. That's not happening as much. And as the result of not being a part of community, a lot of people have lost their sense of purpose. They're going through their days, they're doing their thing, but they just don't really have a strong purpose. And that lack of purpose and that lack of relationship is getting us sick. Okay, so the bottom line is this. We can have strong relationships. And when we do, we slow aging and our life satisfaction increases. So having relationships is a critical point to being well. In every episode, I define wellness as being the happiest, healthiest, and fittest you can be. Well, That happiness part's a big part of that. And that comes through relationships. If we're alone and we're lonely, it is really hard to be happy with that situation. And so I think relationship is the one thing that many of us are missing when we look at our health and fitness, and we need to turn towards that. So I want to share with you just a few practical tips, okay, to combat loneliness, okay? The first one would be to schedule time weekly, face-to-face time with people. Okay, yeah, real people, not avatars, not AI, not online, not Zoom, but, have coffee with a friend, join a walking group, eat dinner with your family. I mean, literally sit down at a table again instead of sitting in front of the TV or eating on the go. Yeah, we get busy and there's kids' sports and all kinds of things going on, and we're driving them here and we're driving them there and we're eating on the way. But sometimes we just need to sit down and talk. Okay. And even just 30 minutes of this can have a huge lasting impact on you. So find the time, schedule the time, have a date night, have social time with your friends. Okay. Because you need that. Make more friends. Okay. You have to be the one that reaches out. Okay. Everybody else is busy too. My mother had the hardest time picking up the phone and calling me because she knew I worked a lot of hours. She knew I traveled all over. And every time I'd say, Mom, you need me? Call. She wouldn't call. I'd call her. I said, if you need me, call. And she's like, well, I'm afraid you're busy. I don't want to bother you. I would not have been bothered. In fact, I wanted her to call more. So be the one that does the outreach. Send them a message, make the call, start the conversation, set up the appointment, set up the date, set up the get together, and spend time with them. Most people are longing for this too. They need this too. They're just not ready and willing to reach out the way that you can. So be the one that reaches out. Next is to get involved. Okay. I'm sure within just about every community, there are groups. There can be community groups, service groups, religious groups. They still exist. Okay. These things still exist. You even here on the island, there's a chamber of commerce. There's a Lions Club. There's groups that you can be a part of where you can meet other like-minded people and hang out with them. Okay. You can volunteer. So if there's an organization like here in Focus, we have an organization called Papagato, and it's an organization that raises money. They basically spay and neuter the pets here because a lot of the owners can't afford to pay to have it done with the vet. So they'll bring in vets and they'll do spay and neuter clinics. If there's an animal that gets sick or hurt, they'll step in and provide services for free. It's not free, so we still have to do fundraisers. So pretty much every time Russell, who runs Papagato, he technically is Papagato. That's what we all call him. If he has a fundraiser, my wife and I make a point of being there to support him and to connect with other people. My wife will occasionally she's hosting a game night, and people will come over and play a game called Mexican Train. It's a dominoes game similar to, I guess, dominoes. I don't know, but they play with dominoes, but it's got a different set of rules. They're over there going choo-choo and yelling words and playing a game. I have no interest in a game, but I will sit down and eat and hang out with the folks that are there. So these are just building relationships with people and spending regular time with them. Okay, now, yeah, you can make it a dating site. You can go to Hinge or Bumble or Tinder. I had to look that up because I didn't know what people use these days, but those are apparently the top three. But again, just realizing that dating and hooking up and doing all this stuff sometimes that these apps are about isn't really going to fix your loneliness, and it's just a placebo. You're going to spend some time with a person, but if it's not for the intent of building a relationship, it's not that meaningful relationship stuff that's going to cure your loneliness or help your loneliness in the grand scheme of things. It solves a problem in the minute, but it doesn't really solve the real problem, which is connection. Okay, so make sure you're with the people that you connect with, that you like. Spend time with them, converse with them. Limit passive use tech. So this is things like social media. A lot of times social media becomes a separator and not something that brings us together, which is really, really odd when you consider that the sole reason these things were designed in the first place was to bring us together. MySpace and then Facebook were all about connection, all about finding people in your area, in your school, or whatever that you had common things with. In MySpace, it tended to be music and art. And that was what was bringing people to the site. And they were meeting other people. Of course, Tom was everybody's friend, but they were bringing people in and you would connect with them there. We had something in common. Even AOL, when it first came out, had their groups, and you could join groups and meet like-minded people to connect with and have great conversations with. Somewhere along the line, it became something else. And I think that's when they were trying to make money and they figured more time on the app was what they needed. So you'd see more ads. And the best way to get you to stay on the app was to manipulate you and make you angry. It was actually then to separate people, because by separating and creating argument, you now had a dynamic where people would stay. They would stay and they would converse, but these conversations were not connection based. They were anger based, and it creates a different problem. Okay. So if you're going to be doing this, I would definitely prioritize in person. And for the love of God, leave your phone at home. I've seen people sitting next to someone else and they're on their phone. They're not even there. So this is not going to get fixed if you're still glued to your phone when you're with someone else. You're not connecting. Okay. And then the biggest part of this is to practice authentic sharing. And what I mean by that is that too many times, particularly in social media, we want to hide the ugly parts. We want to appear to be better than we are. And we don't want people to see our flaws. And that's a problem, because we don't really connect with people if we're not our authentic selves. And it's really, really hard on social media to be that way. It's really hard to say, okay, hey, yeah, I screw up every once in a while. Well, actually, I screw up a lot, but it's like, talk about your feelings. That's how we really connect with people. When you're willing to share your fears and your aspirations and the things that are going on with you, that deepens relationships. That gets people to see who you really are. And by being authentic, when you know they still want to be around you, that's a pretty good feeling. This is your person. This person cares. They're going to look past the little things that you think are major flaws, because they're not major flaws. They're what makes you you. And so don't be afraid to be authentic. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. If they don't like you because you're vulnerable, if they don't like you because you shared something that you feel, then they're not your people. Find some people that do. The people that are your people. Okay. They're there and they're lonely too. So we need to start building better relationships if we want to have better health and fitness. And it starts with you. It starts with you doing the things to make sure that you're combating your loneliness. And in the mix, you're helping others because you're helping them overcome their loneliness. Now, I want to connect with you. I'm on Facebook. You can go to our Facebook group at 40plusfitness.com/group. I'm on there. So you can connect with that group. You can look me up, Allan Meisner. I'm the one with the CPT after my name. You find me on Facebook, send me a friend request, message me. I'm there, and I'd be glad to have a conversation with you. And the guy you're hearing on the podcast is the guy you're going to see on Facebook, is the guy I am with my clients. It is the guy I'm with my family. I'm that guy. So if you're looking for friends, again, social media is not the face-to-face things that we're talking about. But if you're just looking for somebody to help you get started, you're looking for some connection, you're looking for someone to talk to, I'm here for you. So join the group, 40plusfitness.com/group, or friend request me on Facebook, and we can start the conversation. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Dr. Catherine Reed and discuss her book, Fat, Stressed, and Sick: MSG, Processed Food, and America's Health Crisis. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.